you don't have to solve it on your own. And I think too often as leaders, we think we have to have all the answers. And in fact, what I've learned 25 years later is we just need to ask better questions. We need better questions. We need more listening. We need way less answers.
In every single interaction, there comes a moment when we wonder, do you see me? Do you hear me? Welcome to the Heart to Heart podcast. I'm your host, Gayathri Shukla, and I am the founder of Campfire Kinship, an organization building inclusive cultures through storytelling. This season is about exploring something that is core to being human, and that is our need to belong. So imagine gathering around a campfire with stories reaching your heart. I am partnering with CJSW 90.9 and recording in Mohkinstsis or Calgary, a sacred place where the Bow and Elbow Rivers meet, and home to Blackfoot Confederacy, Tsuut'ina, Stoney Nakoda Nations, Métis Nation, and all residents of Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta.
Hello, everyone, and hello, Erin. Welcome.
Thank you.
Today, we have a very special episode. We're going to be talking about empathy, and I'm going to call it the intersection of equity, diversity, inclusion. I believe that many leaders, especially those who come from underrepresented backgrounds, empathy is a superpower. Empathy is something that they themselves have, I think, quite a lot of, having to face challenges and navigating and overcoming challenges. But I'm also curious about how someone can be empathic as well as hold people accountable, especially if we consider that those who do come from marginalized backgrounds may not have that structural power naturally afforded to them. And Erin, you and I have known each other for so many years. First of all, I just want to say I'm so grateful that you're here.
Thank you.
This is such a cool opportunity to record in person as well, sitting in the campus of U of C, where we both went to engineering school.
Exactly.
Just about 2 decades ago or something like that.
Well, it was 2 decades for me, so yes.
I'm sitting here and I can literally see my electrical engineering labs in that building where I used to go.
There you go.
So it's like a full circle that we're here. And so we also worked together for some time in the corporate world. And I know that when you transitioned from corporate to starting your own business, you wrote a book, which Inside Out Empathy, which was so amazing. It certainly has been an inspiration for me to see you grow and evolve through your journey and be able to share this journey in parallel with you and know that, you know, we're not alone. And so I'll just read a little bit of your bio and then I'm going to ask you to share or invite you to share through your own story. So you have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from U of C, and you hold 2 coaching certifications and over 20 years of experience leading projects and teams, author of Inside Out Empathy in 2017, and you began speaking and coaching about using the superpower of empathy to build effective teams. And you've also launched your podcast, Tactical Empathy, which I love, by the way. And you've shared real-world insights on leading with empathy, engaging teams effectively, and achieving people-centered success. Erin, I'm a fan of your work, and I love your mission to help others discover the leader within them so that they can lead from the inside out. So with that all said, would you like to share a bit of yourself and your story of how you got into this work?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's interesting because I get asked that question a lot every time I'm on a podcast. You know, how did you end up here? You're an engineer that talks about feelings and empathy, which is like, for most people can't really, and they, you know, can't really reconcile how I ended up here. And it wasn't, you know, one moment or, you know, this kind of, I don't know, this monumental event. I would call it more of like this slow noticing and slow transition, you know, as I went through my journey, right? And we all kind of start and have this path of where we think we're going to go and the ladder we're going to climb and the positions we're going to have and what our career might look like. And then you throw in a little bit of starting your own family and having kids and work changing and, you know, the industry changing and all of these things that we can't control and some that we do control and want to take on. And pretty soon you find yourself in this totally different place than you thought you would end up. Never thought I would be where I'm at when I started out, you know, like, and every time I come back to this campus, I'm like, just reminds me of when I left here 23 years ago. This is not at all where I thought I would be. I think, you know, for me, it was constantly coming to terms with the leader I wanted to be, watching the leaders around me, noticing what I liked and didn't like, noticing what worked and didn't work, and just kind of over the years becoming a lot more present and mindful and just kind of watchful and kind of studying, right? Becoming the student of leadership. And, you know, if I had to pick an event that probably shifted the course of my career, it would be around 2015, 2016. Our daughter was in grade 6 and she was diagnosed with some learning disabilities and ADHD. And for me, again, as a mom, you kind of have this vision of your children's lives and the direction that they're going to go and what they're going to do and the kinds of students they're going to be. And, you know, neither my husband or I ever really were school was fairly easy for both of us. Let's just put it that way. You know, it wasn't something that we really were challenged by. And so when this event happened, it really kind of shook my view of the kind of mother I was, the things I had noticed and not noticed. Of course, there was a lot of feelings that came up in that. And I ended up taking a step back from my career for about 10 months to support her through that. And it's when I really started to reflect on my own journey as a leader, the kind of leader I wanted to be, the kind of mother I needed to be. And that's when the book was written. It was published the following year. And then, you know, again, you don't know these things are going to happen to you, right? We don't know what's lying ahead. And then I just started speaking about that event and the kinds of insights and learnings that I had gathered out of that, and started paying attention and started to use what I thought what I was speaking about and writing about in my own leadership, and going, oh, this actually works. And, you know, it's making a difference. And then it was actually the pandemic. Again, nobody can foresee those things coming. That really was kind of the final, event, I guess, that led to me fully going into my own business and my own space, and really, you know, moving out of my corporate engineering career and into what I do today, which is leadership development and helping leaders build this empathy muscle.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I love how you shared, first of all, this isn't really a topic that I think gets any airtime in the engineering world. At least I know when I was growing up in university, that wasn't even a topic.
Yeah.
That was on anyone's radar, let alone having any classes about it. And you and I both now get the pleasure to come back here and actually host workshops for students and on these kinds of topics. And I'm so glad that awareness is here today. But I know it wasn't there when I was growing up, and it doesn't sound like it was the case for you. And then
not at all. And I agree with you. I feel so grateful that the program here has offered the leadership program to the undergrad students and the engineering faculty. I think it's such a value add, and I'm so grateful to be able to be a part of it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I'm so grateful that we can help shift and introduce these things as part of the culture, because
totally.
Also, like you, I've been in spaces where in the working world, you don't talk about your feelings.
No.
You're actually sometimes even ridiculed for bringing up emotions.
Yeah.
And that's a really tough place to be, because I was constantly getting this advice of just get a thick skin.
Right? I know. My favorite, like, it's get a game face.
Get a game face.
You know, that was mine. You're too emotional. Get a game face. Like, toughen up. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, toughen up. And then you find yourself kind of trying to fit the mold as opposed to being your true, authentic self.
Yeah. And I think what I noticed is what I came to observe once I started to, so for like the first 10 years of my career, I did try to do that. I tried to like quote unquote fix my feelings and like excavate this part of me that maybe was too emotional. And for 10 years I tried. For 10 years I failed. I'm a human being. Like I would literally have to remove part of my brain to not have feelings, right? And so what was interesting is as I started to observe, it wasn't that other people had an absence of emotion. It was the way they expressed it. Mm-hmm. That there's this acceptable expression, sort of, you know, if expression of emotion is on a continuum, it's like there's this one tiny little spot over on one far end that was an acceptable way in corporate life to express emotion. And anything outside of that was labeled as too emotional.
Yeah, absolutely. And even the acceptable emotion, typically for men, it's like anger.
Yeah. It's okay if you get angry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
In the way that everyone else gets angry, right? So if you pounded your fist on the table or if you shouted in a meeting or if you interrupted somebody, like that was totally acceptable. None of which are the ways that I express emotion.
No, exactly.
At all.
Exactly.
So felt very foreign to try to learn how to do that, and was totally not authentic. Mm-hmm. And if I tried to express emotion in any other way, it wasn't received because it wasn't in kind of that language that everyone else was familiar with. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that emotion, in my view, includes even positive ones, right?
Totally.
Expressing appreciation,
gratitude, like cheering people on, all of those things. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're just supposed to be the stoic person with that part of your brain.
Yeah.
Saying.
Right.
Like, yeah.
And on the other hand, be this mother. Right? Like that was really what I was wrestling at that time, that I was getting this corporate feedback of you're too emotional and you need to toughen up and get a game face and do all these things. And I'm desperately, you know, from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. trying to not have any emotion. And then I'm supposed to go home to my children and be this nurturing, compassionate, you know, emotional being and tuned into what they need and all of these things. And I'm just like it was just way too much.
Yeah, to try and put on a facade.
Yeah.
For the 9 to 5, and then having to remove the armor. Coming home.
Yeah.
And then switch again.
Yeah, and so the skills I was building at work did not serve me at home, and then the skills that I was working on at home didn't really serve me at work, and it just felt like, and nowhere in there was there any space for me to figure out what was really going on with me. Mm-hmm. It always felt like it was about other people.
Yeah, and it's like that piece around humanness too. It's almost like there's a denial of the whole person.
Yeah, totally. Right? I mean, how many times did we hear it's starting to shift, I think, but I think when we were certainly starting out and in the early years of our career, it was very much like leave your personal life at home and leave your work life at work, you know? And I often use the analogy, like I don't carry around 2 suitcases, one with my work self and one with my personal self. And then I just like drop the other one off at the door, whichever one I don't need, you know? And I think for me, that's been one of the gifts in the pandemic is we got to see the whole person, right? We were at home with our children, with our families, with our loved ones, with our aging parents, with all of the things. And work had to figure out how to fit into all of that.
Exactly.
Right. And so I think, you know, as difficult as that time was, one of the benefits that we got out of it was this recognition that we are just one person and it is whole.
Yeah. It is a whole person.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm curious to hear from your perspective too, as you progressed into leadership roles, even in your own career, leading a team. How did that experience shift your understanding of emotions and your ability to express them? Because I know for me in a technical role, it was easier to maintain those 2 personas, right? As crappy as it was to have to do that, I was still able to just say, okay, this is my technical work and I'm just going to focus on that. I'm going to be the expert in my technical area. But the minute you start to lead a team, it's all people now.
Yeah. And I think that's that is one of the things we still don't do well in corporate life is we promote people into leadership positions who are experts in their technical careers or in their individual contributor roles. And we give them nothing.
No tools.
In the way of leading a team. And you're right. This is way less about the formulas and the nuts and the bolts and all of the technical training that we've went into. And it's all about the human person in front of you or people in front of you. And yeah, it certainly was a part of it. I mean, there's definitely been moments as I was moving through. So one of the things I've always been good at is being able to kind of read the room. Partly it's a skill set born out of my childhood, one that kept me safe as a kid. But it definitely translated into the corporate world because I could go into any kind of meeting room and go like, oh, there's some tension here and it's between these two people, or there is something to celebrate here and let's pull that out and find out what that is. And can we just pause for a moment and be happy and celebrate the joy, or like, what are we not actually talking about that we need to talk about, because I can feel the tension. I didn't always trust it. I didn't always know that not everyone could do that. I thought everyone could do that. And I think that's often how, right, we see the world as we are. So we think that everyone sees what we see and everyone can do what we can do. And so part of my learning as a new leader was that was not a skill that was shared by everyone. And it was something that was unique to me and on most teams that I was in. And I could leverage it, right? I could know when somebody was having an off day, and I could go and talk to them and figure out like, okay, like the thing I've learned is that we try, and we all think we're better actors than we really are. We try to hide whatever's going on inside of us from an emotional, standpoint, whether that's we've had a fight with the kids or the spouse, or we hit some traffic and we're 10 minutes late, or we've missed an appointment, or, whatever's going on that's causing kind of some chaos in our lives. We try to pretend like it doesn't affect us. And so we put on the brave face and we build the thick skin and we show up. But the thing is it does affect us because we are our whole human being. And now people who may not be as tuned in to other people's emotional states, they may miss that. And so some people might be able to get away with it for a while. But for me, good luck. Like, I don't hide anything. I'm a terrible actor. You'll know when I'm having a bad day.
We did go to engineering school after all, not acting school.
Right. Like, you'll know when I'm having a bad day or if something's off. And I can pick that up in other people. I can see right through that. And so for me as a new leader, that's where I really had to start seeing this emotional side of me as more of a tool and more of a superpower, and just figuring out what to do with it instead of trying to get rid of it.
And that's where the practice of empathy.
Yeah. And I actually had a couple of leaders who at various points in my career said, like, I don't have this skill that you have, and I need you to kind of be the person that keeps the temperature of the team in check. So if you notice that something's off, can you come and tell me, and let's work through that together. And that's really when I started to see the skill that I had as an actual skill. And not as something I needed to get rid of.
Absolutely.
And then it became, really about figuring out what was me and what was them. And I think, so that's why I refer to the inside and the outside empathy. A lot of us think that empathy is just a practice with other people. And in my experience, that is not true. I have to do way more work to understand, so my definition of empathy is just to try and understand the feelings, thoughts, and perspectives. And that applies to both ourselves and other people, right? If I don't understand even my own perspective, why do I think the way that I think? Why do I feel the way that I feel? Why does this thing bother me or light me up? Why is this my view of the world?
Yeah.
And could it be influenced by something, right?
Exactly.
If I don't do that work with me, good luck trying to do it with someone else.
Yeah, it's like looking in the mirror, right?
Well, they will trigger all the things that you don't even know are going on, right? That's when we start to get into like, my way is the right way, which I definitely have been caught up in, right? And I mean, raising children, I have to do this work every day now because the kids are teenagers and young adults and
with their own thoughts and views and opinions.
Oh my gosh, let me tell you, right? All the things. And so this practice really it started with, okay, like if this is really this tool that we're going to use as a leader, you got to better understand it, because right now it's getting all mixed up and you're You've been practicing for 10 years, shoving all the emotion, all the feeling, all the things down, and they come out at the worst possible times. You know, you get overtired and then you're crying in the boardroom meeting, or you get short and snappy with a team member who just asked how your day was going, you know? And so it's like, that's not their fault, right?
Yeah.
That's my work. So I had to get really familiar with like, what is going on with me? What's my emotions? What's my state? What's my perspective? What things are happening in the world that I'm forming opinions about, before I can then sit down with other people. Because I think what my work has taught me is if you're not actively doing the work of like practicing these self and outside empathy skills, then you probably sit on one end of a spectrum. And one end is, I don't do emotion, which we worked with for many, many years.
Oh, yes.
Right? I don't do emotion. There's no place for it in the workplace. Like, I don't feel anything. I'm a robot. Literally, I've heard leaders say these words. And the other end of the spectrum is, I'm an empath. I feel everything and I get overwhelmed by everything and everyone. And I can pick up on every emotion in every room. And the reason I put these two on opposite ends of the spectrum are because they both are symptoms of the same problem. And the problem is you don't understand your own feelings first.
Absolutely.
So if you're sitting on the end of the spectrum that's like, I'm an empath and I get all mixed up with everyone else's feelings and I get overwhelmed by feelings and I'm a sensitive person and all of the things, you haven't done the work to understand what's really yours and what's really theirs. And you're taking it all on. And that's not what empathy says.
Yeah.
Empathy says you just need to understand.
Yeah. Not even that you need to agree.
You don't have to agree. You don't have to fix. You don't have to endorse. You don't have to do anything but understand where they might be coming from. And so when leaders come to me and they're like, oh my God, I get so overwhelmed by all the emotion. It's like, okay, you just don't have strong empathy muscles, right? And that's both ends are just a lack of strong empathy muscles. And so the work is bringing both of those identities to the middle where we now have some capacity and some strength around being able to understand.
Absolutely. And that's a game changer, being able to understand.
Huge.
Because that allows for someone else to feel like they've been heard or they've been seen. And that's where I think that intersection with the EDI work that I do really takes place. And I'm really curious to hear your thoughts around some of the feedback that I've heard in this space, right, is there seems to be this unfair expectation on women to do the empathy work because, you know, there's that perception that women are just more naturally in tune with their emotions and supposed to be nurturing and caring. And that's how you show up if you're a female leader. And then the minute you kind of step out of that and start to assert boundaries or start to hold someone accountable, there's this penalty for not being, quote unquote, empathic in that moment. And so curious to hear your thoughts or your take on that.
Yeah, I think so. If you are someone, and it's interesting because I've recently interviewed on my own podcast a couple of female leaders who are like, I do not identify as an empath, and I had to learn this skill, right? And so while we can make the generalization that most of the time women are on the, you know, and
it's totally a generalization.
It's totally a generalization. But so I'm just going to say, if you are somebody who identifies with, I don't do emotions and I just want to do my work and get out of, you know, my 9 to 5 and I don't want any emotion to come into this, you probably can hold a boundary with the work really well, but you don't understand how emotion affects behavior, which ultimately affects results.
Exactly.
Right? So the way we feel about things impacts our behavior, which is how we show up in the actions we take, and our actions dictate our results. So if I'm not feeling appreciated at work, I don't come in 5 minutes early. I don't work through my lunch. I don't stay 5 minutes late to finish the task. I might start booking appointments during my work hours because I don't feel appreciated. I don't feel noticed. I don't feel understood. So why would I put in any extra effort? But that my actions, strictly dictated by how I'm feeling in the moment, are going to impact my results. If I don't stay and finish the project, if I don't put in the hours, if I don't go to the meeting or ask the questions or put up my hand, I am not going to achieve the result that is expected or desired, right? Now, the same is true for that person who's on the far other end of the spectrum that's like, all I do is emotion all day long, right? And and so you can have all the meetings and the coffee dates and, you know, the venting sessions that you want, and this person can feel totally validated in their feelings. And if you never get to the part of like, and we have a job to do, right? If you allow the conversation to never kind of come back to, why are we really here? You end up, again, totally different approach, but same problem. Same problem. You don't get the results that you want, right? And so the work is first understanding what's going on with you. Because what I often see if we just play out this scenario is the leader gets frustrated that there's no result or in the lack of results. And so if a kind of more traditional approach would be, let's just focus on the result. Let's just hammer away at the goal. Let's keep talking about the goal. Let's keep, you know, applying the pressure. And let's just try to forget about anything that might be emotionally related to this problem, right? And let's just like, maybe we do posters about the goal. We do, you know, temperature charts about how close we are to the goal. Right. You know, and so we just start like plastering the workspace with like, here's the goal. And we get frustrated. And so we don't understand, first of all, our own frustration, our own disappointment, our own hurt, whatever's going on with us. And then we try to talk to the team. And since we have no space to hold our own emotions, like good luck stuffing more emotions from the team into that backpack. It's not going to happen. And you downplay them. The team gets more disengaged. They don't really care about the goal. They just feel the pressure. The pressure demotivates them. It's not motivating pressure. It's demotivating pressure. They feel less heard, less seen, right? And you just start this downward spiral versus taking like, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes and asking the question like, how's everyone doing? You know, because they already know the goal. They already know the expectation. What they really want is for someone to just acknowledge that they're a whole human being and that sometimes life is tough. And this moment, whatever they're going through, whatever they're experiencing, you know, is a little bit rougher than usual.
And just taking that moment to connect.
You know?
Yeah, and that's where, with this lens on, I guess, women in leadership, there is on both ends of the spectrum, right? Let's say it's a female leader who is new in her role, still learning the boundaries around, you know, asserting her own boundaries, but also holding the team accountable for their goals. And all she's doing is over-empathizing and not really getting to the task eventually. And let's say she does try, and then all of a sudden the team's like, well, I haven't seen this behavior from you. You're asking me to be accountable. What? And then the culture around her is, in a subtle way, or maybe in an overt way, penalizing her for behaving that way.
Yeah. And I think, you know, where we started this conversation with those underrepresented demographics, male or female, doesn't matter. It could be cultural, it could be racial, it could be any underrepresented demographic. I think the reason, you know, I was thinking about this and preparing for this conversation with you, I have zero research to back this up. Let's just be clear. This is my own personal like thoughts. But in my own experience, I think one of the reasons we may have more developed empathy muscles is because part of our survival requires us to lean into understanding what the more dominant demographic thinks, feels, and understands.
Totally.
So we don't even know we're doing it. It's just how human beings are built to survive. And so, again, if we're not aware that, okay, so I've seen, this is where the practice of the outside empathy becomes like we get too strong there and we don't have enough inside. We don't have enough awareness of like, well, what am I feeling? And what are my perspectives? Right? And it really is this fine balance of both, right? And I've been caught in moments where I give way too much away and I've forgotten about me. And I've been caught in moments where it's all about me and I've forgotten about other people. So like it's constantly coming back to what's going on for me and do I understand it, and what might be going on for the other group of people and do I understand it? And then inviting people into that conversation of like, okay, so if this is what we understand to be true for each of us, what's the path to get to there?
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to solve it on your own.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think too often as leaders, we think we have to have all the answers. And in fact, what I've learned 25 years later is we just need to ask better questions.
100%.
We need better questions. We need more listening. We need way less answers.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth?
Right?
Yeah.
And you remember, like I remember walking out of this building going like, oh my God, I don't know anything and I don't have any answers, and feeling like so incompetent, right? And just thinking like, I got to fake it till I make it. And
that was the other advice, right? Fake it till you make it. Ugh.
Right. And it's like, no. I just had to put up my hand and say, I don't know how to do this, but I'm willing to learn.
Exactly.
You know, or how do you do that?
That curiosity.
Right. I remember being on my first job site. It was actually like just a stone's throw over there, and going out and watching like the formwork crew build formwork and the rebar guys tie bar. And I'm like, how do you do this? Like, how do you go from this drawing that I know I made in university to that in the ground, you know? And they're like, well, this is why this doesn't work. And they were more than happy to teach me, you know, but if I would have walked around that job site like I knew everything, we would have had a different outcome.
Yeah. And let's not even talk about the safety aspects of that too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally hear you. And by the way, you said you don't have research to back this up. I think there's plenty of research. In fact, I was just reading a book last week called Cast by Isabel Wilkerson.
Yep.
You may have heard of it.
I have.
And she actually talks about that experience of developing empathy if you're not in a position of power for those who are in power.
Yeah.
Which sounds counterintuitive, but it's
you have to survive.
You have to survive.
Yeah. Yeah, because we go back to the definition of empathy, which is just to be able to understand thoughts, feelings, and opinions. If you're in any kind of group where you don't have structural power, you have to understand how the group works to be able to survive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then but to your point, which is really important, is how do you now turn that lens inward?
Yeah.
And self-empathy. Practice that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And to go
see if are my needs being met?
Yes. Right. And what do I think about this? And can I, and I think this is where we really have to test those stories all the time of like, am I behaving in this way because I truly am unsafe?
Mm-hmm.
Or is this just my nervous system feeling unsafe?
Due to past triggers or traumas.
Or because I'm a human being.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm going through a phase in the business where it's growing. I've got kids moving in and out of my house, like graduations, all the things. And I notice I am having this unsafe feeling right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing unsafe in my world. Let's be clear. My life is not in danger. But I notice because of all the uncertainty in my life and all the change and all the transitions that I'm going through, my body is still built to keep me alive. Right? It's its number one job. My brain is like designed to keep me alive. And it's going, you're not safe here because there's too much uncertainty. Yeah. Right? And so again, through the work of noticing, practicing, building that muscle, I can go, I'm going to show you you're safe. Yeah. Right? I'm going to do the things I know I need to do to show you that you're safe. And all this uncertainty can exist. Your life is not in danger. It's okay. We're going to get through this. But I will tell you that 2 weeks ago, I wanted to take this out on my husband in the worst way, and he was almost the collateral damage of me not noticing what was going on. Because it became about, you're not supporting me enough and you're not listening and you're not, it was all about like all the things he's not doing. And then it was like, whoa. What's going on with you? So just to paint the picture, I'm like in the fetal position on the whole hotel floor, as we're at a soccer tournament. And I'm like, this is not about you. You have not done anything different. And I said, I just like all of this is coming in the moment and I just need a moment to process. And it was like, oh, it's because of all of these things that are happening in your life and your body's not feeling safe and you haven't taken the time to do your own inner work. right? This was one of those moments where I got caught giving too much to someone else and everyone else and not enough to myself to really understand, do I have the capacity for this right now? Can I take this on? You know, what do I need to resource myself to be able to live in this amount of uncertainty? Yeah. And to show my body that it's safe.
I love that you use the word resourcing and nervous system. I often talk a lot about the concept of psychological safety within the EDI space because, of course, those topics also bring their own triggers for people. Yeah. And it's that whole idea of your nervous system is there because it's doing its job to keep you alive. Yeah. It's there to help you survive, not thrive.
Exactly.
And if you want to move into thriving.
Yeah, you got to do the work.
You got to do the work.
Yeah, and your nervous system does not know the difference between somebody yelling at you across the table and a lion on the safari. Yeah. It does not know the difference. Yeah. Right? And so it's your job to notice when you're in those moments and when you're triggered and how you get yourself out of those. It's nobody else's job. Nobody can do that for you because nobody else knows what's your trigger. Exactly. Right? And I mean, I can see it in other people. I can see when they get triggered, but I don't know what the trigger is or why that thing has triggered them.
Or they themselves may not know. It may be something that happened in their childhood that they have no even cognitive memory of.
Well, anyone living with teenagers, I mean, they live in a constant state of being triggered because they have no prefrontal cortex yet. So it's very good training ground for this.
I have a teenager that just turned 13. So
you're well on your way, you know. And it's just like, I'm constantly going like, I'm not here to ruin your life, right? Because that's their immediate, like, you're trying to control me. You're trying to, like, that's their trigger is just anybody telling them, even making a suggestion feels like you're telling them what to do or you're judging them, you know? So raising teenagers is like the best training ground for keeping yourself resourced and doing the work of, you know, making sure you're staying in tune with what's happening inside the conversation.
Absolutely. And that resourcing can look different for different people. I often say a resource is just something that makes you feel safe.
Totally.
Right? Anything that could be meditation, like taking 5 minutes of your day to meditate or journal or having a therapist, somewhere where you can go to calm down that nervous system.
Could be a walk in the park. It could be going out in your backyard, taking off your socks and shoes and putting your feet in the grass. Like there's just... And I think that's really been, I would say the last like 5 to 7 years, that has been the experiment in my life is just like, what are the things that are going to work? You know, and some are a bit bigger and need a bit more time to plan. And other things are very simple and very small.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. But to your point, it's each leader also having that awareness of what their own triggers are and what their reactions are in the moment, right? Because let's say you are a leader who has newly promoted, you know, a woman on your team, and you yourself are seeing her now just trying new things and trying to assert her boundaries, assert her authority. And if you're reacting to that as her leader, that's an issue, right?
Yeah.
And that requires your own inner work to go.
Exactly.
What is the belief system that I'm carrying here where that's triggering me?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, empathy, it's a tool. It's not the only way we lead, right? It's like any of our other leadership tools, right? Where we may have to have a negotiation tool and we may have to have a difficult conversations tool and we need to have a trust tool. You know, empathy is just that. It's just a tool. And I think the reason it's so important is because before we can move to solution, we have to have understanding, right? So your example of, you know, someone who's newly promoted and trying to find out their boundaries and maybe triggering other people on the team, like that's where we could use this tool of empathy to go, here's what's going on for me. Yeah. Here's what I think I'm seeing in you. Is that correct? You know, like help me understand, not fix, not agree, understand what's going on for you. You know, what are you feeling? What are you seeing? What do you think about this? And once we have that conversation, it provides kind of that more 360 view of the situation, because we always think unconsciously that everyone sees things the way we see things. And so unless you build that skill to come in and actually go, well, I'm just seeing my slice of the pie. Right? And I need to see your slice of the pie and I need to see their slice of the pie and I need to kind of build more of a pie. before we can jump to how are we going to fix the problem. And so I think, to your initial opening conversation around empathy and accountability, empathy starts like it's before the accountability conversation so that we can figure out and really understand what everyone is thinking, feeling, and seeing. And the problem or the solution or the goal or the whatever you want to call it that you want to hold people accountable to, it's still there.
It's still there. It doesn't go away.
It doesn't
mean
go
you're
away.
ignoring it.
And it doesn't mean we're ignoring it. And it doesn't mean we're just sitting around like a kumbaya circle and, talking about feelings all day long. It's like, okay, this is how we're all feeling. This is what we all see. This is it. And how are we going to get there?
Yeah.
Right? How are we going to tackle that? Like, maybe I need to step in and do 10% more because you've got a big life thing going on and you need 10% less. Okay, great. Let's talk about that. Yeah. Right? But if we just keep focused on the goal and we forget that we're whole human beings and we don't have that empathy conversation, that's when people go, I'm out.
Yeah.
Like,
totally.
You don't see me. You don't value me. You don't hear me. I'll go find somewhere that I belong.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
So.
Yeah. They say, right? People don't leave jobs. They leave their bosses.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's the culture you have to live in every day is the culture that is set by your immediate leader.
Yeah, which really speaks to the outsized role that leaders play. And so I love that you're doing this work, Erin. And I know in the past when we've collaborated together on workshops and things, and I love how synergistically the work that you do with empathy and the work that I do with story as a tool to create that empathy just complements each other so well.
100%.
And I couldn't be more excited, to do this work and having this privilege now to take my engineering background and experience, skill sets and apply this type of leadership lens to that through empathy. So
well, and I think both of us have probably a mile-long list of experiences where we have felt unseen, unheard, undervalued, unappreciated, list the adjectives there. And it's not necessarily because we were, maybe, right? But it all has to do with our perception of other people's behavior, right? And that's why I think it's so important to just really check in with your team. How are you receiving me? Yeah. Right? I interviewed someone yesterday on my podcast he was like, I was totally oblivious. Like, I thought I was the best leader ever. And then my team literally had an intervention with me to tell me all of the things that I was doing wrong and the way that I was impacting them. And he's like, I had no idea. And it was not my intention at all. And I hear that all the time. Yeah. Just because you have good intentions does not mean that everyone will receive them in that way because they don't have your lens of the world.
Well, and speaking of lenses, like we're literally on the wrong side of our eyeballs. So we don't see how we come across in the world.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But to your point too, I think that takes that courage to ask that question even, right? How are you receiving me? Because I know, unfortunately, that there are people that will not be open to that conversation as leaders. Yeah. Yeah. And that's also a problem, right?
It is also a problem. And I have hope that I think our younger generations are demanding more from us as leaders. There's more choice than ever before in the world about how they work and where they work and whom they work for. And I think that the leaders that do not develop these people skills, like we are not building widgets on a factory floor anymore. This is not the Industrial Revolution.
No, well, especially with the AI tools now. Exactly. I mean, that's a whole other topic.
Oh my God, it's terrifying. Don't get me started there. But leaders have to, if they are going to have any kind of human workforce in the foreseeable future, they are going to need to build their human skills. And that's exactly, they are skills. They are just like learning how to do algebra or calculus or electrical engineering or civil engineering or being a doctor or whatever. It's a skill. And you got to learn it and practice it and dedicate time to it.
Exactly. And it's like I like the word skill. I like the word muscle. And it's like building that muscle memory, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking to a different leader yesterday who was like, why do I keep noticing that I did the wrong thing after the fact? And I'm like, that's part of the building of the muscle.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because 6 months ago, you didn't even know you were doing something wrong. now you have a conversation, and upon leaving the conversation, you're like, oh yeah, I should have done that. Or, I realized that I got into this mode. I'm like, in another 6 months, that's going to become muscle memory. And this is exactly how we build it.
Exactly. And let's not rush it.
Well, you don't go to the gym once and all of a sudden have wicked abs.
Transformed.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like you got to go every day for the next 6 months. It's a process.
And you're going to keep upkeeping that.
Yeah. And then you got to maintain it, and you got to keep coming back. And some days you're going to be sore, and other days you're going to forget, and it's just because we're human. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Erin. Mm-hmm. How can people find your work and work with you?
Yeah. Thank you. I was going to say all of the social channels, but I am not on all of the social channels because there's so many of them right now. Instagram and LinkedIn, just search my name, but also my website, which is erinthorp.ca, and Thorp has no E on the end. So, yeah.
Nice. I will make sure to link those.
Thank you.
I do have one final question for you, which I ask all my guests. To complete the sentence, I feel a sense of belonging when?
I feel a sense of belonging when I feel connected. And for me, connection happens on a few different levels, right? It feels like I'm connected when we have eye contact, right? When we have that kind of nonverbal language that we speak, I feel connected when somebody can repeat back to me what I've said and really demonstrate understanding. I think that's when I feel like I belong.
Thank you so much, Erin.
Thank you.
Such a wonderful conversation, and one that we've been wanting to have for a long time.
I know. It's so true. It's so true. No, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Heart to Heart. I'm your host, Gayathri Shukla, founder of Campfire Kinship. If you'd like to learn more about storytelling, come visit campfirekinship.com. If you liked today's episode, hit the subscribe button and join us for future episodes. This podcast is being produced in partnership with CJSW 90.9 in Treaty 7 land in Calgary.